They open the hatch to access the lower compartment. A thick white mist rises to the upper deck. A spark ignites the fumes, exploding into a ball of flames. Almost 70 nautical miles from Rio de Janeiro off the northeast coast of Brazil are vast oil and gas reserves known as the Roncada Field in the Campos Basin. They were discovered in 1996 and cover an area of over 60 square nautical miles in water depths of between 1,500 and 1,900 meters. When first discovered, the Roncada Field has an estimated reserve of 2.7 billion barrels of oil and 27 billion cubic meters of gas. Brazilian multinational energy corporation Petrobras won rights to tap this reserve. Petrobras was established in 1953 and partly owned by the Brazilian government. This conglomerate is one of the largest companies in Latin America with headquarters in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. To tap into the oil reserves in the Roncada Field, Petrobras installed the P-36 floating production unit. The P-36 semi-submersible structure was originally a floating drilling and production unit known as the Spirit of Columbus, constructed sometime between 1984 and 1994 in Italy. It was originally designed to be operated at a water depth of 500 meters with a processing capacity of 100,000 barrels of oil and 2 million cubic meters of gas per day. But the oil field it was intended to serve wasn't commercially viable, so the platform was offered to Petrobras to use in the Campos Basin. Petrobras evaluated the platform's use in the Merlin South and Roncada fields of the Campos Basin and decided it's best suited to the Roncada field as its first floating production unit. The Spirit of Columbus needed major modifications to adapt it for use in the Roncada field. Between September 1997 to October 1999, Petrobras replaced the processing plant, which allowed it to handle larger volumes of crude oil and natural gas. They installed a bigger power generation plant, removed the drilling equipment and propulsion system, and changed the mooring system to adapt it for deep water anchoring. They increased the payload capacity to accommodate the new facilities by adding stability boxes in the pontoons and blisters for additional support in the columns. Blisters are small pontoons to create additional buoyancy. The final floating production platform had 2 pontoons for buoyancy and 4 support columns. After the conversion, the platform had the capacity to produce 180,000 barrels of oil and handle 7.2 million cubic meters of gas per day, operating at depths as deep as 1,500 meters below the waterline. The rig was renamed the Petrobras P-36 and was considered the world's largest oil production platform with an estimated price tag of $350 million. The Roncada field was so vast that Petrobras planned 3 modules to tap the reserve. Each module had a floating production unit known as a host unit, drawing oil and gas from a number of production wells and their injection sites. An injection site is an entry point to pump water or chemicals into the oil reserve to force the oil toward the production wells, making it easier to extract the oil from the well. P-36 was the first of 3 host units planned for the Roncada field. The P-36 production unit was located approximately 6 nautical miles from the wells and anchored in 1,360 meters of water. The platform was designed to host a total of 21 production wells and 7 injection sites. The oil treated at P-36 was transported by a relief vessel and transferred to a very large crude carrier, the P-47, with a capacity of 2 million barrels of oil. The compressed natural gas processed at the platform was transferred to shore through a network of gas pipes. In May 2000, Petrobras launches the Module 1 phase of their Roncada oil field project. Module 1 is the first permanent production system for Roncada, with the P-36 floating production platform servicing 6 wells to start. From the first 6 wells, P-36 is able to start producing 84,000 barrels of oil and 1.3 million cubic meters of gas per day. By the end of 2001, it's projected to produce 90,000 barrels of oil a day, increasing to its peak capacity of 180,000 barrels of oil and servicing 28 wells by the end of 2004. Petrobras pays for the development of Module 1 with a project finance loan at a projected cost of about $1.95 billion. The project finance loan is paid back using the cash flow or revenues generated by the project. This puts pressure on the company to operate in the most economical way and cut costs where possible. Throughout the 90s, Petrobras' full-time workforce downsized to half its peak, while production and operations increased over the same period. Subcontractors fill in any new manpower requirements, giving Petrobras the flexibility to hire and fire quickly. In March 2001, almost a year after starting operations, P36 has a total of 175 people on board. 85 are crew who stay with P36, and the rest of the crew on board move between various platforms to commission new equipment and provide rolling maintenance services. On the 14th of March 2001, the crew have two tasks that aren't part of their normal routine. They have to prepare for an inspection team's visit scheduled for the next day. The inspection team has to check repairs made to some cracks in the ballast tank and the stability box above the pontoon next to the back right column. At 1900, the crew open the manholes that lead to these back right compartments. The other procedure for the day is to empty the emergency drain storage tank in the back left column. The drain storage tank collects excess oil, gas, and water used in the production process. P36 has two 450 cubic meter drain storage tanks located at the back left and back right columns, installed inside the support columns of the pontoons. The drain storage tank in the back left column has been undergoing repairs since the 10th of February 2001. The drainage or bilge pump has been removed for maintenance, and the vent pipe at the top of the tank has been sealed using a blank flange or metal disc. At 22:21, the maintenance crew begin their work pumping out the oily water inside the port or left tank. Because the crew are contracted from an outsourced company, they haven't been trained on the platform's equipment and standard operating procedures. They prepare to pump the oily water towards the production header, which is where the oil from the various wells gather into a single line for processing. The standard draining procedure is to pump the oily water to the production tank, which is a holding tank that goes into a separate process to separate oil and water. The crew makes sure the starboard or right side tank intake valve is closed, which connects to the port tank and the production header. This should stop the flow of oil from production or from the port side tank into the starboard tank, but the valve is either damaged or they don't close it properly. Next, they open the drain valve from the port tank into the production header and try to start the drainage pump, but it doesn't work. While they're working to start the port tank's drainage pump, oil from the production header reverses flow and moves toward the lines of both the port and starboard storage tanks. As far as I can understand, when they opened the valve without the drainage pump running, that created a low pressure, allowing oil and gas to flow back down the pipes. Now, gas, oil, and water flows into the starboard tank on the right side through a partially open or damaged intake valve. And because the starboard tank's vent line is sealed with the metal disc during the repairs, pressure inside the tank begins to build up. At 23:15, after 54 minutes, the crew is able to start the port side pump, reducing the reverse flow of oil and gas from the production header. But water being pumped out of the port side tank continues to leak into the starboard unit for another 67 minutes, increasing the pressure in the sealed right side tank. Over the course of more than 2 hours, the aft starboard drain storage tank accumulates around 13 cubic meters of oil, over 1,500 cubic meters of gas, and 64 cubic meters of water, pushing the pressure inside the tank to almost 10 bars, which is 5 times higher than your car tires. At 22 minutes past midnight, going into the 15th of March, the pressure inside the starboard drain storage tank reaches its failure pressure of 10 bars. The tank suddenly bursts open, releasing water, oil, and gas into the column. The crew at the pump in the portside tank hear a muffled but intense thud coming from the aft starboard side of the platform as the starboard tank bursts open. As the tank ruptures, it creates a mechanical explosion, releasing a large volume of high-pressure gas. The high-pressure blast crushes a 46 centimeter seawater service pipe, which supplies the firefighting system. A significant amount of water and oil has already built up in the starboard tank over the past 2 hours. Now, seawater from the crushed firefighting service pipe starts flooding the aft starboard column. The weight of the water and oil creates an uneven weight distribution, and the platform lists or tilts by 2 degrees. Luckily, the high-pressure mechanical explosion doesn't cause a fire. And as water drains from the crushed seawater service pipe, it depressurizes the main firing line, stopping any more water from filling the starboard aft quarter. The rig stabilizes with only a 2-degree list. But when the main firefighting system loses pressure, it triggers the processing plant to enter an emergency shutdown mode. The emergency shutdown automatically activates the seawater pumps in the forward and aft starboard quarters, pumping water rapidly to the right side of the oil rig. Water starts pouring through the fractured pipe in the rear starboard column. Gas released from the ruptured tank seeps through the column's ventilation system, reaching the main deck and activating the gas sensors. Although gas reaches the 3rd and 4th level areas inside the column first, they're not classified as risk zones. There are no gas containment devices, no gas alarms, and none of the equipment is protected from explosions. Warning lights start flashing in the control room. In the span of 17 minutes, almost 2,000 alarms are triggered. The operations crew are confused by all the alarms going off at the same time. They don't know how to respond or which ones to prioritize. The compartment on level 4 inside the column fills with water from the fire system, and the water level reaches the column's ventilation system. The ventilation system should close automatically, but it doesn't. And so water spills over to the lower part of the column, passing through the ventilation opening and into the ballast tank manholes, which are open for inspection. Water rushes through the manholes and floods the pontoon and the ballast compartments that house the ballast pump and thruster equipment. A team of firefighters rush to the location of the accident. They enter the aft starboard column and open the hatch between the 3rd and 4th levels to inspect the lower compartments. As they open the hatch, a thick white mist billows out. The compartment is so dark they can hardly make out their surroundings. They don't see flames or feel any heat, but they can hear the sound of leaking water. They don't go any further without proper lighting in the area. I'm sure they have torches, but it's not easy to inspect a room that's flooding when you can only see the narrow spot from your torchlight. The thick white mist escaping from the lower compartment in the column is compressed gas. It rises and dissipates through the upper decks. At 39 minutes past midnight, 17 minutes after the aft starboard tank burst, a spark ignites the escaping fumes. The explosion is so powerful that it destroys the area above the column, immediately killing most of the firefighters. The ballast operators work to keep the platform level long enough for the crew to evacuate. Between 0144 and 0420, 138 non-emergency crew are transferred to supply ships using a crane and personnel transfer basket. No lifeboats are launched. The emergency response team that remains on board attempts to reach the area damaged by the explosion to look for survivors and evaluate the extent of the damage. They retrieve one body and rescue a severely burned firefighter who dies a week later from his injuries. The column continues to flood and the overflow fills the lower areas of the pontoon. The ballast pump short circuits, leaving the sea chest valve open. The sea chest is an opening in the pontoon below the waterline where the ballast tank draws seawater to regulate the stability of the rig. The open sea chest valve lets seawater rush into the hull, further flooding the pontoon. The ballast operators are still trying to figure out how to stabilize P-36. They try flooding the opposite column, the port bow, to counteract the weight of the water in the aft starboard column. They can't slow or stop the water flooding into the aft starboard column. By flooding the port bow column, they're able to stabilize the level of the rig. But as more water floods the port bow and starboard aft columns, the rig sinks lower into the water. Under pressure to control the stability of one quarter of the rig versus another, they don't pay enough attention to the other two quarters. P36 passes the point where the crew can control the stability and lists around 6 degrees, sinking deeper into the ocean. The crew decide to abandon the rig, and just after 6 o'clock in the morning, a helicopter evacuates the remaining crew. Water continues to flood the open ballast tank. At 08:15, P36 lists 16 degrees, allowing water to reach the chain locker opening on the main deck level. The platform slowly and progressively floods, increasing the list, and by 1500, it reaches 21 degrees. Petrobras sets up a coordination team to salvage and refloat the platform. By daybreak on the 16th of March, the platform has sunk a further 20 centimeters. To refloat the platform, the team decide to pump nitrogen through the stability box next to the damaged column to expel water from the flooded compartments. I'm not sure why they choose nitrogen, but I assume it's because it won't combust if there's a flame. 2 vessels with nitrogen tanks and air compressors sail to the accident site and start pumping nitrogen into the column that evening. They start with 4,100 tons of nitrogen in an attempt to discharge 1 million liters of water in the flooded compartments. On the 17th of March, they start to inject compressed air into the other tanks on the platform until it stabilizes and stops sinking any further. A specialized salvage team from the Dutch company Smit arrives at the scene and takes over the salvage operations. The oil rig is stable throughout the day, so Smit stops pumping air and nitrogen into the platform's column at 1800. The next day on the 18th, Smith's team boards the platform to seal off the air vents so they can pump more nitrogen and air into the lower levels of the columns. Divers descend to 50 meters and drill holes in the submerged buoyancy tank and connect hoses to pump the nitrogen, but they can't connect the hoses to the flooded buoyancy compartments. Overnight, going into the 19th of March, P36 sinks slightly lower in the water and its list increases to 25 degrees. Smith's dive team goes back in to reconnect the hoses to the submerged compartments, but the weather deteriorates, making it difficult to carry out the dive, and once again they abort the procedure. After midnight on the 20th of March, the support vessel staff reports that the platform has listed to 30 degrees. Smith's team decide that their only option is to cut the mooring lines and the risers, which are the pipes that transport crude oil from the bottom of the sea to the surface platform. While they prepare explosives to cut through the risers, the platform sinks deeper. At 11:40, P36 slips beneath the waterline and sinks 67 nautical miles off the coast of Brazil in 1,360 meters of water. 9 bodies from the firefighting team go down with the rig. The size of the platform and the depth of the water make it too difficult to raise the platform. After the accident, a 3-month investigation was carried out. The commission concluded that the accident had multiple contributing factors and not one individual person could be responsible, but they didn't rule out human error. The commission suggested that Petrobras review some of its procedures on the oil rig, like reducing paperwork for managers and supervisors so that they can concentrate on operating the rig, proper training for all personnel on board, and more gas detecting devices should be installed. They also recommend that rig manufacturers and operators shouldn't put any production process tanks or vessels inside the support columns of the pontoons. When the platform sank, it had around 1.2 million liters of diesel oil and 350,000 liters of crude oil stored on board. In the first 24 hours, almost 350,000 liters of oil spilled into the ocean. To minimize the environmental impact, 26 ships were stationed at the accident site with dispersants, skimmers, and 32,000 meters of booms. Petrobras P36 cost an estimated $350 million to build and was insured for $500 million. But Petrobras was found negligent in operational activities that led to the accident, so the cost of the structure was split between the insurance company and Petrobras. Insurance premiums for Petrobras increased by 400% from $7.5 million to $48.8 million the following year.